Today, we're going to be talking with one of my great friends for the Story and Community Podcast, which is a podcast for creative thinkers who are looking to make the world an interesting place. We're talking with one of my friends, Shaun Gordon, the CEO of Kiss Books. Just an all-around great guy. He's got a course on album sales now. He is always pushing, like me personally, to do my best. And he's pushing everyone I think he knows to do his best. And so what I'm really excited to do is just kind of learn more about like what makes this guy tick, how he kind of connects with people. So man, let's talk a little bit about you, man. So you're the CEO of Kiss. You've done so many awesome things, and I'm a big fan of Kiss Books. It's definitely like top two album companies. I think just that for quality alone, like I actually have like other companies' albums that I put next to Kiss. I'm like, listen, everyone else sells this. This is what I have. the reaction's always like, whoa, okay. So now we see why you charge this much. I just, how do you go from where you started to selling albums and doing all these other awesome things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Sometimes I ask the same question myself. It's not like I just like woke up and was here. It has taken a ton of hard work. But when it came down to it, I was a photographer for 15 years. I shot around 500 weddings. I was based out of Southern California at the time, so there was no real off season. And it was in the years that I was shooting over 50 weddings. I shot 64 weddings one year, over 60 a couple years, and the surrounding years I was shooting over 50 weddings a year. And to me, it was definitely busy. I was like shooting a lot, but it was like the one thing that I was doing. And so I loved it. There was no off season, so I had all 52 weekends to shoot. It was multiple sessions, some weekends. And in that same year, I shot 100 engagement sessions. And when it came down to it, I was like, I know I can't do this forever, like 50, 60 weddings. And I had started to charge more so that I could shoot less weddings and all those things. But when it came down to it, I was like, what I love, I'm an artist and I do love creative entrepreneurship. But more than that, I love like the EQ, the emotional intelligence, like relationships and people. And that's what I was getting to document. And I loved that. But I was like, how can I make a bigger impact on what's happening there versus me showing up and shooting 50, 60 weddings? I had associates at times shooting more weddings than that. And I was like, this is cool, but then I was like, where are the issues in our industry? And that's kind of like the studying that I was doing, is like solving a problem in the industry that you're already in love with. And I was like, albums are great. I love them. I had toured warehouses. I've always loved product. I came from the printing world. The last real job is what I say when I was 22 years old, was I was running a printing press. And so I love the creative aspect of taking something that's like a blank paper or canvas and making it into something. I've always loved that. So I had a background in color and all these types of things. And so I was not the healthiest person at the time, but I was shopping on this website called bizbin.com. It's just all these companies that are for sale. And I would just like search through it, like what's interesting to me. And I was looking at like other photography studios and different things like that. And then my search started to get into like, these are these labs that are for sale, like actual labs, local 1 hour labs, bigger labs, things like that. And I came across one. I was like, I think I'm going to see if I could buy this lab. They had 4 for sale, and I bought the one that was like locally to me. So I bought it, and I was like, I'm going to start printing for my industry. And then an album sale, or this guy that was selling album makers, like a machine that made albums. It didn't do everything for you, but it felt like it did. He came in and was like, hey, you do a lot of weddings and you're known in the industry. Like, you should make albums for people. I was like, I have my albums made. At the time it was Leather Craftsman, who's no longer with us. They were a great company. And I was like, I could probably do that. I thought I could do everything at the time, I was very narcissistic and I still have some of that in me. But I was like, I told my wife, and I remember it like it was yesterday. We were sitting on the couch, and there's this guy. He's Italian, very like machismo kind of a guy, selling us this on this machine, and my wife was not having it, But it was a big purchase, and I was like, I think we're gonna do it, And so I did that. I started to make albums for me and it was a forum back in the day, kind of like Facebook groups are now. I was part of 2 big forums, and so I started to visit those groups, and I was like, I'm going to start this like album company, and we're not going to do all the things. We're going to do one thing really well. We're just going to make an album, because I could sell. It didn't matter if it was like this high-end Leather Craftsman or Queensberry album, or this album that I can make, which was like, I was new at it, but it was still pretty cool, leather cover, all these things. I was like, I could sell it for the same price. It's really the experience that we're selling. It's not necessarily this product, but I can get better at the product. product. So I bought the machine. I started visiting these things. I was here. Actually, I live now. I live in the Midwest in Indianapolis area. I came out here to speak at one of these events, and I met who became my business partner. He was like, I love what you're doing. I have a creative industry background where I was like marketing and creative director of these big companies and had these huge ad companies hire them and stuff like that. And I was like, man, the stuff that you do is really cool, but I'm not really interested in a business partner. He was pretty persistent. And by the time I got home, he like had sent me an offer like, hey, what about this? You know, we'll start this separate company and we'll simplify it even more and all this type of stuff. And I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. And that was in the end of the year. It was like November that I was out here. And I said yes in December. By March, we were at WPPI, what used to be a huge trade show.
Yeah.
And this was in the year 2000. We were at WPPI. We could not get a booth because they were sold out. This is back in the day when, like I said, it was way bigger. But we showed up with like merch. We had hats. We had a website. We had some hoodies. And it said KISS, keep it simple, the world's simplest book company. That's what we stood for. We had one product. At the time, we had one product, a square book, 3 sizes, 6 colors, no options. So we had these stickers and these cards that said 1360, and people were like, what is this? And we had been talking about it in these forums, and so a lot of people were showing up to, like, we rented out the bar and we'd hang out and give people shirts and just talk to them about the product that we were going to launch. We had a few prototypes there, and that was in March, and in May we took our first orders of the year. I'm off. It's 15 to 16. 07 is when I met him. 08 is when we launched. And it was just wild after that. In March, we were at WPPI. In May, we took 36 orders. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. We sold 36 books. By the end of the year, we were doing 100 books a month. And then within 18 months, we were doing $1 million a year. And I was like, it was insane because I went from like owning this lab with this little book binder, doing our things, to like I had to move out of there into a warehouse, hire staff. And I'm like, I am literally flying by the seat of my pants, like building this plane while we're flying. And I'm like, I had lost hair. I had alopecia twice. I was so stressed. I was like addicted, I swear, to like Red Bull. That's what kept me awake because I was working 20-hour days. I was still shooting all these weddings, building books, and like, I would go home and take a nap and go back to work. I had little kids at the time, which was wild, pretty newly married at the time, and maybe like 4 or 5 years married at the time. And I was like, I've made it, right? Like financially I had made it, and I learned so much in the process and realized that like money is one of the reasons that we do this. There's no doubt about it. But when it came down to it, I really understood that there's got to be more to life than this, because while this was going amazing, there's other parts of my life that were really struggling. My wife and I went through a lot of stuff. We're still married today, but there was a season in there where it got really, really tough because I was like a workaholic, but I was really like not the best version of me. I was focused on one thing, is like, how can I make more money? But it got to a place where I was probably going to come home to a very big house with some really nice cars in it. And even if there were people in it, it just felt empty. And I knew something else had to change, and a lot of things happened in our relationship throughout that. But then fast forward a little bit to where 5.5 years ago now, I went to my now former business partners. Like, I have a vision for this company, and our visions aren't as aligned as I'd like them to be. I'd become the CEO of the company at the time. I was like, I think it's time for me to buy you out. And I did that and really got focused on what can we do to impact relationships that are in these photos. I love creative entrepreneurs and photographers, and that's what I constantly am educating and giving away as much as I can. And I love them, like I said, but when it comes down to it, I'm like, how can we cause something in the relationship? And like at first we were a wedding book company. Now we do a lot of things like seniors and boudoir and families. And there's a lot of things. About 80% of what we do is still weddings, but I want it to be 50-50 in 3 years from now, to where we're doing 50% weddings, and that's continuing to grow. But 50% is portrait work, because there's so much cool stuff going on. I was on a podcast yesterday, and it was like, all this guy does is like college people that are graduating college. I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but it's like senior. senior, like high school.
Yeah.
It's senior in college, and he's like, that's all he does, and he's like very busy. And I'm like, this is so cool, because when it comes down to it, it's like we're documenting a moment in life that's very important to that person.
Mm.
And my goal is to set a tradition in their life that when they look back at it, they're like, I remember when I did this. Let's say it is a wedding, because that's the one thing that I know really, really well. We got married 5 years ago, and you're flipping through an album like with your significant other, your partner, and it's like, I love the concept of stopping, because it's so easy to get distracted with social media, and just every time I pick up a phone, it's like, yeah, I want to look at photos, but there's 14 other things going on that phone. But what does it look like to slow down, sit down, and be like, it's our anniversary, right? And we
Yeah.
sit down and we flip through this book, and we're like, man, what's something that we did this year that we can celebrate? And what about, like, what if we think about next year sitting here? What do we want to celebrate next year that we can go do from here on? I think if we stopped and did that, Kiss has done hundreds of thousands of albums at this point. But what I've started to say to my team is like, the next 100,000 albums, I'm going to show photographers how to create a tradition in these wedding albums to where they have something that they're standing for in their relationship, because statistics are not really for us when it comes to relationships, right? Like, doesn't matter if you're what religion you are or whatever. It's like the statistic still says, like, as humans, we don't do well together all that much, like half, right? Half of us
Which
do
is
well.
crazy, because that's
And
what
even
everyone
then,
craves. Like, we want connection,
right, yeah.
and then we just completely botch it every time.
Right. It's like, how do we show up? And maybe that's it. Maybe we just don't know how to. And so actually this year in 2023, we're coming out with this card that will go with these books if photographers want to send it with the album. And it has 5 questions from a relationship coach that I've used, and they're phenomenal. 2 of them are those questions, that I just said. It's like, what do you want to celebrate tonight? And what do you want to celebrate next year? That we can go do from here going forward. And then there's 3 other questions. There's her information's on the back. So if they ever do get in that sticky moment where it's like, hey, I don't know what to do with this. These questions are great and everything, but I still don't know how to do this relationship thing. They can reach out to her, because I just want to, like I said, money is one of the reasons that we go into business, right? Like freedom and finances and those types of things. But impact is really what's been on my heart. And I'm like, how can we impact? Because it's very powerful what we do with cameras, right? Everybody has a camera on them now, pretty much, with a phone in their pocket. But when we started as a photographer, I was a photographer for so long that I was like, man, this is easy. I'm a magician. I stop time that you get to look back on. That alone is like purpose, right?
It's magic.
So what do you want? It is. It's a wonderful thing, and it makes it really simple to create this like passionate vision for your company as a photographer. I stop time for you. Like, here you go. Like, you can't buy more time. It's like, no, but I can stop time for you so you can look back on it. And the studies are showing that whenever we look at a photo, it's as if we're in that moment. The brain does this amazing thing where it's like, I have this picture of my wife and I, and we're in Cabo together. It's one of our favorite places to go. And it's like, if I look at it long enough, it's as if I'm there with her. And like everything changes. Everything. I'm in Indiana where the weather's not great right now, but when I look at that photo, I'm like, yeah, you're in a different place, and I'm like, I'm moving. I got to move soon. Every January, February, March, my wife and I look at houses elsewhere since we've moved here from California. But I'm like, it's as if I'm in Cabo with her, And so I'm like, how can I do this for people that made this big decision last year or 7 years ago, whatever anniversary that they're celebrating? I'm like, that's what I love to do. And that's kind of like where we're headed now. I'm grateful for everything that I've been through, but it was not an easy journey. I'm so grateful for my photographic background. That was one of my favorite times in life, was when I was behind the camera. I loved creating those things, and I miss it sometimes. Every once in a while, I'll hop out with some photographer that I know and second shoot for them, especially when they're in cool places. But it's like, now I have an army of photographers that choose to use KISS, thousands and thousands of photographers. I'm like, how can I help them impact their clients? And when it comes down to it, you do some education, so this. I can tell them how to do it. Whether or not they go and do it is up to them, but I'm constantly trying to hold up a mirror and being like, hey, you're amazing. Humans are amazing. But we rarely believe it. I struggle with this a lot. And it's something I'm adamant about, is like, I want to look in the mirror and fall in love with that person so that I can serve others better. And yet I hold a mirror in front of people regularly when I am educating or coaching or whatever. And I'm like, do you see how amazing you are? Because if you do, you're going to impact so many more people. And so that's what I get to do now. And I'm beyond grateful. Like I had no idea that I could ever do this. And I know I'm not just getting started, but sometimes I feel that way. It's like, what else can we go do?
Yeah.
Like I got breath in my lungs. Let's go do and impact the world with what we love. And it's this beautiful, creative entrepreneurship gift, as well as like these people that are trusting us to do this and allowing us into these intimate moments of their life. That is a powerful place to be. It's like, cool, what do you want them to do now? And that's what I do with albums, and I just love it.
It's such an amazing story because like there's so many things you said that one hit home for me. Like you're talking about being able to jump back in moments. I don't remember, and this is a crazy thing. I don't remember anything about 2020 or 2020. Like it's a blur entirely. I can look at a photo and I see a moment, and like for me, I'm not even brought back into the moment because I don't remember where I was at. I never took the time to stop and remember. So like 2020, that was a huge year for me because I was in a book, but I looked back like last year. It's like, okay, we get published in a book for the pandemic photos. I never took 5 days off to even like there was no celebration of it. So like I'm looking back and there's like maybe 2 photos of me through the entire year. So like that impact, we're like, oh, I could open up a book and kind of relive through stories. Man, what would that mean if I had it now? And to see someone like you with so much heart towards other people and towards telling the stories and making sure like couples, they get to go back and really celebrate those moments. I just, like I always say, like, yeah, a lot of companies make albums, but it's like, man, just hanging out with you and just understanding who you are as a person and understanding that we have this connection where we know it's not like I take photos and that's one thing we can say. But my job is more of a historian than it is anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And a company like Kiss that works through that process, like, man, I feel safer when I have an album from you guys because I know that whatever is kind of being done, like one, you guys will take care of me if something goes off. But then the second thing is just like, you're doing this with purpose. You're not just trying to get my cash, because if you wanted my cash, you'd probably just sell me, you'd sell in bulk. Or you wouldn't understand someone like me who's like, I only want to shoot 10 stories a year. And that's how I look at it. I'm shooting 10 stories. I'm not doing 50 or 60 weddings a year because I want to make the biggest impact I could ever make on a couple with every couple I work with. So I just want to say, man, like, not only are you inspiring for reasons for why you're in business, but how you got there. You just saw a random thing for sale and you're like, hey, you know what? I could turn this into something. For people who are just becoming entrepreneurs, they don't see that very often. You're a rarity. What do you think it is that like, what do you think causes you to be that person? I know you have a really cool thing you call the 2 Bs.
Yeah. When it comes down to it, it really is that like focus on, that's it. It's who we are, not what we do, because I have a story and I could share it sometime with you, but, you know, a lot of it with some of your, the people that are listening in. I thought that the things that were done to me or the things that I did was actually my identity. And when it came down to it, the lights really came on multiple times in my life. But when my wife started to share with me, she does some like transformational coaching and things like that. But she came up with this concept because called the to be list, because she, just like a lot of humans, including myself, it's like we make a to-do list, right? The way Tony Robbins says it is like we underestimate what we can do in 10 years, but we overestimate regularly what we can do in one day. Our to-do lists are longer than a day a lot of the times, especially like us achievers. I'm like, I could probably smash this whole list out. I was like, no, like that would take you a week. And then I don't get it done. So I just add it to tomorrow's list, which is the same length. But my wife was coming to dinner. We were pretty, like when the kids were younger, we were pretty adamant about like getting to the dinner table together. But we could tell whether or not she had her to-do list done by the way that she was acting. Was like, if I've done these things, I've accomplished enough, and that makes me a good person, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, man, that's it. That can't be it. So she started to come up with this concept of like, she'd write her to-do list, and it could be like, I'm going to Target, I got to do this, and I'm going to get my car washed in this. But who do I want to be today? And it started as, who do I want to be today? I want to work on being more patient. And at the end of the day, if she was more patient than she was yesterday, she's like, I'm good. Like I didn't get everything done on my to-do list. And then I started to evolve it to where it's like, while I'm at Target, who do I want to be? Going into this podcast or Zoom call with my team, who do I want to be in that room? And I would reset myself to where I was like, I'm going to go give somebody like some feedback on the job that they're doing or something like that. So, cool. Who do I want to be? I want to be a strong leader. I want to listen really well so that I can serve them well. And so I would write those to be's next to that room. Like I'm going into, a Zoom call with my marketing person.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I want to be this. And then before I'd go into it, I would have these like 15-minute windows between my calls. And that's what I do is I just read the to be that I made in the morning when I was like fresh and everything. Like, who do I want to be in that room? Who do I want to be in that room? Because who I want to be in the gym is different than who I want to be when I'm leading my team. And so to be more patient throughout the whole day, yeah, that may be a thing that I'm working in the grand scheme of things. But it's like, sometimes I'm like, who do I want to be in the car? Because I'm running a little bit late. I might not be as nice as I once was or whatever,
I wouldn't know
but
anything about that.
it changed everything. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It
that's
really did. It changed everything for me.
that's such an interesting way of looking at, like, because I know, I mean, you deal with, you have staff, you have family, you have people that you're driving around, and so your interactions all throughout the day are probably like they're impacted by your mood. Like, we can't necessarily get out of that. And this idea of like, I'm going to take 15 minutes and I'm just going to go, who was I intending to be when I like set this meeting? Is so it's so powerful and kind of like just changing. Like, what I do typically is like, I'll meditate before I do something because it calms me
Mm-hmm.
down. If I'm feeling anxious, I'm just going to meditate for a minute and then I'll come back in. It's like, okay, now I'm relaxed. Now I've taken a minute, I've breathed. And just like you, like, I'm doing 5,000 things a day. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, one of the things I'd be curious to know about you is like, okay, you're thinking the same way I'm thinking. I could have probably 200 ideas in an hour and write them all out, and they'd
Mm-hmm.
be things I want to do. How do you limit what it is you're committing to doing?
Yeah. It comes down to like, I know what I'm committed to before the day starts. Really, like, I've gotten to a place because it's a muscle that we really. It's like going to the gym. It gets stronger, and focus has been the thing that has changed. Because even when I was in business with my former business partner, I mean, the corporation was called Ember Tank. It just meant all these embers that were in the fire because we constantly had these ideas. We made 7 brands at one time, and a lot of them were making money. But when I became the CEO of Kiss, I was the first CEO. We were like, someone needs to run this thing. Finally, we were 8 years in, and things were bigger than either of us thought. But we had money, and so we were starting other businesses and other passions that we had. I was like, you know what? The only way we're going to impact is to focus. And so I know that my vision is to help, my tagline is like, I help photographers go from starving artists to successful. And the way that I do that is through our product. Because I know that, then I get to say, like, is this idea for that vision? Or I basically have this system where it's like some things go on the shelf and they wait. And I'll read those from time to time. And sometimes I bring them into place. A lot of times they live there for years. Ideas are great. And they're kind of a dime a dozen for people like you and I. They come like
Yeah,
they come a lot, right? And I love a good whiteboard session. I have a big whiteboard in my office. Whenever
I've got four.
we travel with those big, yeah, exactly. We travel with those
Yeah.
big pads of paper where we can write. When we take over a hotel room, it's like I feel bad for the people that have to clean it up because they're just pulling these sticky notes off the wall because we photograph them, then we turn them digital. But I love whiteboarding. But then I learned that I'm a visionary. I'm a dreamer.
Sure.
I have now hired, and I've been with this integrator for a while now, and I love them. My integrator gets to decide what gets implemented and what doesn't, and
Hmm.
is it a part of our vision? We use the EOS system, which is the book is like traction or rocket fuel. Both of them are pointed towards this system called the EOS system, and it's basically just a system that says like what do you stand for, and what does that look like a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. 10 years from now, you set big, hairy, audacious goals and things like that are huge. But then you break it down to like, cool, what are we doing today? Or what are we doing this week?
Hmm.
And that's really helped me. Focus is one of these things that changed the game for me physically, mentally. It was like there were certain areas that were working in my life, like I said, business, making money. Other areas weren't. And so now my like moral standard is I stand for health, wealth, and relationships. And in those things, there's specific things that I'm working on. If I come up with an idea and it doesn't fit into where I'm headed, it's okay. It just gets shelved. And sometimes I just give it to somebody else. Like, hey, this seems to be in line with what you have going on. Take it or leave it. This is what I think is a great idea. Because I used to think all 100 ideas of mine were great. And like
Same.
four of them probably were. But the focus, it came down to this. A lot of the people that I follow that are my mentors, they don't know they're my mentors, a lot of them, because I've never talked to them, but YouTube is a beautiful thing.
Right?
But so many of them were saying like, you get to do one thing really, really well. And they say, what's that saying that says master of none? It's like,
Oh, it's if you're like a jack of all trades, you're a master of none.
We actually get that saying wrong. The original one said we're jack of all trades, master of one. Or yeah, it says master of none. It used to be master of one. So we can do a lot of things, but focusing on the one thing that we're amazing at, I didn't realize what it was for me. I was like, I'm the CEO. What does that mean? I'd read what does a CEO do? It's like, he's a decision maker, right? He dreams up things. He makes sure things are getting executed. Like you kind of do these, you can read enough about a CEO to where you actually have like 5 jobs. I'm like, no, that can't be it. Cause then there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of mediocre CEOs. I was like, what am I great at? And when it came down to it, I don't know really what I'm capable of intelligence wise because I never really applied myself in school. I didn't go to college or anything like that. And I hated school because it wasn't something that I loved. But I do know that my emotional intelligence is really, really high. And I've used that for good and for not in the past. You know, my goal is to really work towards being like very honest about everything and dealing with it with that. But there were seasons where I was very manipulative and things like that. But because of that, like my visionary and EQ, my emotional intelligence was like, that's what I need. So I need a counterpart. There's only like, I think it's like 7% of people on the planet can do both. And even them, they can't do them really well, meaning like a visionary and somebody that actually integrates. And so I have an integrator now. So I get to dream up the world. And then I have very specific things that I do for the company. The seat that I sit in is like education. I have a role in marketing, but I don't have the final say in marketing. I have a financial person. Like I had to learn to trust other people with these things because I was kind of a control freak. Even if it's like finances was never one of my favorite things. Still is like I struggle with it. But I had to learn to make decisions on finance, not based on the dollars, but based on the impact. And that helped me a ton. So now I have somebody that it's a team that
Yeah.
does all the numbers. And then I get to make some decisions, but I don't have the final say in it. I'm like, what's my budget for travel this year? And they're like, it's X amount of dollars. I was like, is that more or less than last year? They're like, it's more because we know that you're impacting with your education. I'm like, great. I just want to make sure where I'm at, but I don't make the decision. And I can, of
Yeah.
course, I can flex my owner if I want to, but I don't. If I ever have to do that, I'm like, man, maybe I don't have the team that I need to, or maybe I'm not the leader that I need to be. So when it comes down to it, it is like the people that were making a difference versus the people that weren't. The difference was they made commitments to themselves and they showed up for it day after day after day. And I was like, I used to make fun of who I am today because it's a boring life. But I know the impact that I'm making is not boring. The fruit is amazing. But it's like my days look very similar to each other. There's creative space in there, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that I get to, and I change my view often because I live in Indiana. It's pretty affordable. So I
Yeah.
do travel a lot, but I'm committed to like doing the same thing over and over again that's working. And then I do have an area of dreaming up what we think we can implement. But of those like hundreds of ideas that we have, hardly any of them get implemented until we get to a space where like, yeah, let's do this one now, and let's add this one in because there's not space for all these ideas. And if I do a lot of things, I'm probably going to be mediocre at them. But if I do a few things, that's the impact that I'm able to make today.
Yeah.
And it from the outside looking in, it sounds boring. And like I said, I used to make fun of who I am today, but I was like, the people that I was following that are my mentors, a lot of them were doing the same thing. They were like getting up at a certain time, setting their sleep patterns a certain way. And I was like, no way. Like I'm creative late at night. That's when the phone's not
Same.
ringing. Like I used to be up till super late at night. And I was like, great. There's nothing wrong with it ultimately. But I was like, okay, what if I did have a bedtime? You know, like I hated bedtime as a kid. I hated it as an adult. Like, don't tell me what to do. I've always had authority issues up until now, I like to say,
Hey, we're friends.
because I
We
like
get it.
to, yeah, exactly. But I was like, what if it's like, I'm a Christian. And so like, you don't have to be a Christian to understand this. But I was like, at the end of the day, what if this whole like judgment day, you know, like where I'm before God, the question that I would have is like, who did you make me to be and how close did I get to that? Because a lot of times we just stop showing up. You know, they say like people live to be 72, or we bury people at 72, but they actually die at 27. Why? Because
Yeah.
we just stop caring about life or like becoming the next version of us. And I'm like, no, I want to see what this thing is capable of, what I am capable of. And the only way that I can do that, I believe, is by following people that have something that I want. I'll study that. And they're like, they're in bed by 9:30, 10 o'clock. They're up at 5 a.m. They're at the gym at 6. They're doing these things, setting themselves up for the day so that like, here's a little simple thing. I knew who I wanted to be as a dad. And my youngest kid is like I'm not sure if he's real or not. I think he's like my actual like inner child that was like the what's that Fight Club where it's not a real person. I'm like, this is actually me. It freaks me and my wife out all the time because he's so much like me. But when he wakes up in the morning, he gets up at 7:45, and when he comes down the stairs, you don't know what you're getting. He could be grumpy, he could be happy and dancing. You don't know what you're going to get. And there's seasons where he's like grumpy, right? But I'm like, okay, I can't control that. I can make sure he's in bed. I can make sure his diet is a certain way because he's 13 years old. But I can't control it still. And so I was like, who do I want to be? I'm like, if I get up at 5 and have my morning routine, I'm at the gym at 6, I'm home by 7:30 so that I can have breakfast when he's down there. And I'm like, I'm good to go. Like I've got my workout and I've got all these things. I know who I want to be. It has made such a huge difference in how him and I relate. Because if he's coming downstairs or if he's waking me up in the morning, like, hey, can you make me breakfast? I'm like, that's when I'm a grump, is like right out of the gate when I'm like, I stayed up too late. Whatever. I was like, I can change that just by getting up a little bit earlier and setting this routine in my life, making sure I get enough sleep, that I'm eating what I need to be so that I can be who I want to be in that relationship. And so much change between him and I because of that. And you can multiply that in any relationship that we have. And so it took that uber focus to say like ideas are wonderful and I'm going to keep dreaming. And I love it sometimes I'll get a little down and I'm like, I think it's because I haven't really spent much time like just turning some music on, like getting creative, getting a cool view and just dreaming, like I miss that from time to time. So my team knows like, make sure to get Shaun enough dream time or we could get grumpy Shaun. He's like, like just getting stuff done, which is fun. But I'm like, that's not what I'm built for. I'm built to dream as well. Yeah. And so the dreamer is allowed to dream, but dreams are just that. They're dreams. When we want to make them into reality, I get more excited about the dream, but there's space where I get to dream where it's like sometimes, some painters will just paint something and they'll look at it and learn from it and then they'll toss it out, because they learned so much through that. I'm good with that now. I used to think like I said, every idea was great. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but we get to put it through these filters of what I call an integrator. And they get to say whether or not my stuff gets pushed through. So that's helped me a ton.
That's probably one of the most interesting things because like for me, I'm the same way. I still like last night, literally I was up until 5 a.m. just because I kept having ideas and then I turned on YouTube and I'm like, maybe this will put me to sleep. And then YouTube knows me so well that they go, no, why don't we teach you this new thing? And then I'm like, wait, what if I applied this for this? So like I'm up until 5 a.m. And one of the things you said was really interesting to me. It reminded me of my favorite quote from Steve Harvey, which is that he said, if you knew what something would cost to do it up front, right? If you knew how hard it was going to be to get where you want to go, you would never even go where you're trying to get. You would never do it. So this idea of like this like stopping force, and I have something similar. Like my assistant Tyler, he knows that if I will work myself until I'm like completely a zombie. He knows if I don't get out and I don't go for a walk or I don't listen to music or I don't work out, I become very useless quickly.
Yep.
So it's just this interesting thing where it's like, okay, so not only am I thinking this way, and I'm sure there's somebody else in this audience who thinks the same way. You've been there and done it, got the t-shirt, and now it's like, this is what the result is. A multi-million-dollar, I'm assuming, company with KISS, and now you're inspiring people. Dude, even just you going out on the weekdays and you're like doing cartwheels in front of your bus, your son's bus or whatever. It's inspiring because I know like you started this weight loss journey to just be a better, be around for your kids and do all these other things. And now I see like, oh, wow, look how many things he's accomplishing by saying no to that side of you that says like, hey, why don't you be up until 5 a.m. and just create and create and create and create. And it's good to be surrounded by people like you who motivate me to go, okay, I don't actually need to be up at 5 a.m. unless I'm actually getting up.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with either version of it. It was just like, what's working best for me. And it happened to me last night, actually. Like my daughter's in town from college. And so she wanted to hang out and they threw on a movie, and a movie equals I'm probably going to fall asleep. Like there's one movie we recently watched and I was like, man, that's the first movie I've seen without having to go back and rewatch it. Cause I end up just falling asleep because my brain just kind of like numbs out and it just goes to sleep. I like sleep. Yeah. But like last night I was like, this movie's not that great. My daughter was pretty checked out and on her phone. So we're not like having quality time together. I was like, hey, I think I'm going to just go and read up in bed. And then I'll see you in a little. I like to go to bed with my wife. But I was like, I'm going to just go get in bed. I'm going to try and not fall asleep. And so I threw on YouTube. I was listening to Audible at first. I was like, I just want to like look at some YouTube. And I got into like some Alex Hormozy stuff. And I was like, man, this is so good. And I'm just like, and then it starts stacking those videos up for you. Just like you said, YouTube knows you. I was like, okay, it's getting close to my bedtime. This isn't the stuff that I get to do. So I just tagged a bunch of them. Like I want to rewatch these, but I was like, I have an evening routine where I like start to, there's a YouTube that I just listen to it. And a lot of times I have to put a timer on because I'll fall asleep through it. Cause it's like, it's 8 minutes long. Sometimes I just fall asleep during it because it's the same thing, but it's like, it's what I want to fall asleep to. Cause it talks about like who we want to be and this like version of us that's not, and it's just like, I know what I want to go to bed thinking about. And that is like who we were made to be, not who the world thinks we were made to be. And so I had to shift that because my wife would have came to bed at some point, which she did. But I would have just been like, these YouTubes are too good, and I would have just been flipping through it and it would have been 2 a.m. And then when my 5 a.m. alarm went off, I would have been like, why, I've ruined this day, like over a few hours of YouTube, where I woke up today, I went to the gym, and then my daughter wanted to go to the gym. I knew that yesterday, so I went to the gym twice today. But I've watched those YouTube videos during the time that I want to be working, not during the time that I was like, I wanted to be really like settling in and setting myself up for the next day. And so it is, what would you be willing to pay for? I love that quote. Would you be willing to pay up front for these things if you knew it? And it's like, most of us would say no. Why is that? Because it is very hard work. There's another side of that where it's like, we know what some of this is going to cost us. So what are the things that we can offload so that we can afford it as well? Because if I was up till 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and my 5 o'clock alarm, I would not have paid that. And so I didn't. I chose to just change it. Where in the past I would just be like, no, I was not disciplined. That was not something somebody would say, like, Shaun's a disciplined person. 6-7 years ago, somebody would not have said that. Today, most people that know, if you look at my schedule, you'd be like, holy smokes, you're disciplined. It feels weird with me saying that because I was like, no, discipline equals not creative, no freedom. I feel like I was chained to something. I hated budgets. I hated all these things. Now I like live by budgets. I live by a schedule. Like my assistant knows that if it's in the calendar, I'll be there. If it's not in the calendar, I'm going to miss the appointment, and, but I live by it and I'm totally good with it. I don't feel restrained. I feel like I'm making more impact because I say what I want on my schedule. They just make it happen. But I'm like, I know who I want to be in all these things. And I know I've set myself up for the day. Like, I know what my tonight's going to look like. And before I'd be like, man, that is so boring. Now I'm like, no, I know I get to hang out with with my daughter and her friends that are coming over for dinner. I know who I want to be in that meeting. I know that I'm going to let them hang out for a bit. I'm going to go upstairs and kind of like settle in. I know what I'm doing tomorrow at the gym. And I'm like looking forward to all of these things. And when I get there, I'm like, oh yes, this is like, I get to do this. It's like, it was the opposite of what I thought it was, like even a budget. I was like, no, I'll out earn all of these habits, and I did Dave Ramsey way back in the day. Dave Ramsey makes sense for a certain type of person. I still live by about 80% of what he says, but a lot of it doesn't apply to bigger business. But I was like, there's no way I'm doing Dave Ramsey. Like when my wife and I would hear about it and we're like, oh, that sounds, she's like, that sounds like a good idea. I was like, that sounds like torture. And then I did it and I was like, it was so freeing when we got out of debt. I didn't realize the impact that a lot of this stuff was having on me because I just didn't know what I didn't know, Now it's like the diligence, the discipline, the dreaming that does become reality. When it does, it's worth the wait because I know the impact that I'm having. I don't know all of it, but I know enough of it that the fruit is just, it tastes wonderful. It's worth it.
It's crazy. It's like these conversations like we're having right now. If I would have heard this probably 10 years ago or, right after 10 years ago, I was an art director. If I would have heard this then, I would have been like, no, there's no way. Because I was working 18 hours a day. I was basically sleeping in the office and I was in charge of probably 18 or 20 employees underneath that. But now me at this stage of my life, I'm like, no, this is where I want to be. I want to be boring so that I can be more effective. And it's hearing people like you say like, hey, this is what it took. And going, it was worth it afterwards is really what makes me kind of go, okay, so maybe I don't want to be the person that's up until 5 a.m. coming up with ideas for my students, even though they love that I do that. Maybe the better version of it is like, okay, I'm going to be up tomorrow and I'll do that during the afternoon. And I think the other interesting part here is too, is like with your to be thing, I was recently going through this because I knew we were going to have this conversation and it's one of my favorite things you've ever taught me. And you literally said it in passing. And it was like, man, do I want to be somebody who has and watches like a Hulu subscription or do I want to be somebody who's obsessed with YouTube? And the thing is, there's a negative and benefit on both those sides.
Totally.
YouTube turns my brain on, which allows me not to shut it off. And then, rather than
Yep.
instead of watching 2 hours of movies, I'm just thinking 24/7.
Yeah.
I
No
get fried
doubt.
out. Man.
Yeah.
Dude, I think I've told you this a few times, but just every time we have an interaction, I'm like, man, this dude is so valuable. Just like, I mean, yes, in the album space, and yes, in the educator space, but just as a person to look up to and be like, hey, you don't have to do all the crazy things that you think are important. Maybe 10% of your ideas are worth it.
Yeah. And that's okay. It really is like I had to surrender, and somebody yesterday called me humble, and I was like, huh, like that's what I want.
Yeah,
But I just, it, do my actions line up with it enough for somebody to notice it? That's when I know. That's like when you get the shirt, like you said. Um, I was like, I'm gonna be the guy that's gonna go to bed tonight, like when the party's still happening, And it's like, yeah, why? Because I know who I want to be,
yeah,
and it's worth it, And that's the thing. It's like I'm the same way. 10 years ago, not a chance. I would be making fun of the person that was saying the things that I'm saying.
yeah,
Yet they had a lot of things that I wanted, and I was like, I'm going to figure out a way to get it without doing those things. Because even if you listen to some of my mentors, Alex Hormozy is one of them. He's like, I don't make my bed in the morning. You don't have to get up at 5 a.m. to do this. The guy gets up regularly because he's ran gyms for a long time. But he's like, that's not the magic, and it really isn't. The magic is, and he's been saying this a lot recently. The magic is what's the commitment that you have to yourself. Mine happens to be I get up early, I work out before a lot of people are up, so that I can be who I want to be when they do get up. That's my thing. That's commitment that I've made. That doesn't mean like if you have young kids, that probably is not going to be your thing. And when I had young kids, that was not my thing. But what are the commitments that you want to make to yourself, including who you want to be, and start showing up in those regularly? Because that's why so many times now I'm no psychologist or anything like that. There's clinical depression and anxiety, and we have some of that even in our family. So I'm not saying if there's something wrong with you. I don't believe that at all. What
sure,
I'm saying is a lot of time it's self-induced, because if we do not hold commitments to ourselves, that's today why I get up and I look in the mirror and there's questions that I have.
yeah,
Like, today's the day they find out that you're not enough, that you're not smart enough, that you didn't do college, that you didn't do the things and I'm like, it's because in that area I haven't been consistent enough with myself so I can believe that in myself. And so I don't fake it till I make it, but I do start saying like, cool, what is it going to take for me to start to feel that way? And that's why I went on the fitness journey that I did. I had done CrossFit, I had done all these diets. I've abused so much food that I can never pay it back. Like I don't know why I'm not diabetic. Literally,
yeah,
I would just go in and I would grab handfuls of chocolate chips. That was my thing. I love chocolate, brownies, stuff like that. And I would do it like in secret. I'm like, I'm that person now.
hmm,
And I was like, okay, that's not going to allow me to get to my kids' weddings. And
yeah,
I don't know if I'll be there or not. I still can't guarantee it. But what's the likelihood if I'm doing that versus if I'm eating healthy? And eating healthy is boring. It is 100% boring. I love food.
yeah,
And yet it's not worth it to me because I want to be at my kids' weddings, because when I travel, I want to be more comfortable. My son loves this ski trip that we go on, and I'm like, he seems kind of miserable because he's not the most organized person, because he's like skiing, he skis, I snowboard. Snowboarding's way easier. It's like one board, you can put your helmet on, your shoes are actually comfortable. Skiing is like a joke. It's like the boots and there's two skis and two poles and a helmet and all these things. When he walks up, he's like not super organized. And yet when we're on the slopes, it's super fun. But one time he said, like, I love that trip that we get to go on. I'm like, man, I'm so shocked at that, because it's a chore to get there.
yeah,
But what happened was, it's what we get to do and who we are in those moments that it's worth it to him for us to go through all that so that we could have those moments. And it just blows my mind. But I'm like, I'm committed to that because it's what he wants, and then
hmm,
we get to be connected. I used to be the type of dad that was like, I know what's best for my kids. Like, a lot of parents believe that. And I
yeah,
used to believe that. And I still struggle with it from time to time. I don't know what's best for them. What I do know is what's like safer for them. I know what feels like a better choice than the one that they could be making. And so now I'm like committed to like no shame, no judgment on them. But I could, if they ever ask for advice, which they do pretty regularly now because they feel safe, I say, I'll give you a couple other options.
Yeah.
But whichever one you pick, I want you to know I love you no matter what. And I have it written on my arm. It says, I love you all the way, no matter what. Because I want them to know, like, you're probably not going to always make the best decision. I've been 18 and 21 before and all, and I, we all
Yeah.
have, and didn't make the best decisions, right?
Yeah.
But what I did say is, like, no matter what, when you make that decision, I want you to know you can come to me, and I'm just going to get under it and pick it up so you can breathe a little bit more. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to say I told you so. And if I ever do, please give me that feedback, because I want connection. I don't want to be right. I do want you to be safe, and I do want what's best for you. I think I know what's best for you, but I don't. I'm not God. And so when you go through that pain, sometimes that makes us who we are, because the story that I have is insane. For where I'm at today, from the things that I've been through, it does not make sense, right?
Yeah.
But what happened was I just started to show up and really become who I was made to be, not who I thought. Because that sugar, like the chocolate, it was like I didn't have to deal with reality when I was like indulging in that. And that sugar used to be something else that was white that looks a lot like sugar and a lot less healthy than even sugar is. There's been a lot of things in my past that are very unhealthy. Why? Because I didn't want to deal with reality. Whether I was succeeding, I knew the pressures that were probably going to come from the responsibility of success. And I knew what it felt like to fail. I didn't want to feel any of that stuff. Sugar was one of those things that's like, hey, the world's actually okay a little more with like obesity than they are with me doing cocaine, right?
Sure.
But I was like, neither of them add up to who I want to be and who I can become. Therefore, I'm just done with it. And there's times where I have sweets and things like that, but it's very rare compared to what used to be, because it's about the to be. It's not about the to do's. The to do's matter, but not nearly as much as who I am, because I'm a millionaire. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a brother. I'm a son. That literally tells you nothing. It tells you all the things that I have a dad. I have two brothers. I have a wife. I have a business that's worth a ton of money, right? That's all it says. It doesn't tell you who I am, because I could be a total prick as a brother. And you don't know that. I'm just a brother. So, oh, it's cool. You have brothers. That's cool. It's like, maybe it's cool. You don't know. I could be a terrible brother, or I could be a patient brother and a loving brother and someone that challenges and supports my brothers. I could be either one. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm constantly trying to preach, is like, what matters more is who you are, and who you are today is enough. Not as like the cliche, like you are enough. It's more like you have it in you. How are you going to choose to show up? That's a little bit harsher version of it. And that's what I believe. And I want to challenge, and that's why I love chatting with people like you, because you're so like open. You're like, tell me the things, Shaun, I want some things that you have, and I want you to have it too. I'm like, cool, here's what's worked for me, take it or leave it,
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm just going to keep showing up and doing. I just happen to have this album company that I get to do this through, and I'm so excited about that as well,
Yeah, it's such a cool thing. I mean, literally, like we're talking about this, and I'm like, I have 2 Red Bulls in front of me that I've been drinking because I got up I slept for 3.5 hours, and then I taught a 4-hour class, and then I'm doing this podcast. And I got another class later on tonight. So it's like, I'm seeing this and I'm like, man, I really could have set this up better. And that's the important thing. It's like, if we don't have these conversations, if I don't know people like you, if I'm not surrounding with motivators, I don't know that there's a better option. So I'm going to keep doing the dumb shit. And then all of a sudden I'm going to be 50 years old and go like, well, I didn't want to be unhealthy at 50, or I didn't want to be unhealthy at 70, or I didn't want to be, whatever. And I destroyed my heart by drinking Red Bulls, or I destroyed my heart by just not sleeping, or, I got diabetes or anything else. And it's like, man, there's so many people in your life that are surrounding you that could give you the answers you are looking for if you would just be open to being wrong for a minute. And I have to say, man, like I'd say, the things I learned from you are just like, be who you want to be, kind of go forward where you want to be, set routines that set you up for that, and be okay with paying that price. But also just realize, like, you're not going to be perfect at any of this stuff. And that, I think, is the most valuable thing that I've learned from you as someone who just, like, again, you inspire me, man. That's why I have you on this podcast. That's why I wanted to learn more about Shaun, and I think any of the stuff you taught today, like everyone, not just me, I'm sure there's somebody in this audience who's listening or is going to be listening to the podcast when that's up, or on YouTube, whenever, right? They're going to be like, wow, I really wish I would have thought through this. And it could be, them at 30, 40, 50, whatever, or it could be them at 16, which would be amazing. Just so they can avoid stuff, right? It's like, that's why I teach people, even in my course, like, I'm teaching you the stuff that I wanted to do when I started that I didn't know how to do in the first place. I didn't want to be you. You said you shot 50, 60 weddings, nightmare for me, but you loved it. I like shooting 10, maybe 20 at the most, but just shooting the best version of it I can. Because I shot 72 in a year, and that's when the whole mental breakdown happened. You can
Yeah.
burn out. Man,
Oh, 100%.
I just want to appreciate you showing, just you showing up here, you giving this kind of information to people. I don't want to like respect your time because I know you got this schedule. You probably got to go take a nap or go do a cartwheel in front of a bus or something. I don't know. But
Yeah.
so where do you think where's like the best place people can reach out to you? I know kiss.us is the Kiss site. And you have a course, the Album Accelerator.
Yeah.
What's the best place for them to kind of reach out to you and learn more about kind of maybe this stuff or maybe the albums in general?
Yeah, there's one place that I've committed to. I know it's probably not shocking to you, but it kind of cracks me up when I talk about it because I no longer do email. I don't even check my voicemail. If you call and I don't answer, you'll get this funny message that says like, "Hey, just don't leave a message. You probably could have texted me." It's one of those things because it was like, how much of my time am I wasting listening to mostly sales calls? And
Yeah.
just deleting them. Now I just don't. But the one place if you follow me, I actually respond to all my DMs still at my personal Instagram. It's at Shaun Austin, ShaunAustin. It's my middle name. And that's where I will respond to. That's where you'll see cartwheels in the morning. Actually, it's kind of funny because you just mentioned something. I just posted something on Pace Morby. He's a guy I started following after Grow With Video. Really cool guy. He's in the real estate market. But he posted something that says he has this kid and he's holding him in front of this audience. And he said, it's wild how much we do impact each other and we don't even know it. But at this age, it's very easy to see because kids are constantly watching us. And this kid is little. And he said, why don't you guys all start clapping? And everyone starts applauding. And the kid's like, oh, we're just what we're doing, And he goes, it's like that still as an adult. You show me the few people around you, and I know this is like a saying, but like you show me the few people around me, and I can tell you where you're going to be in a year and in 3 years.
Yeah.
If you have 4 millionaires around you and you're not a millionaire, it's very, very, very likely you're going to become the next millionaire. But a lot of times we surround people with the people that are just a little bit below us and stuff like that because it's just easier and it's comfortable. If I complain about this, they're going to agree. Look at Facebook. It's just one of those places that's really easy to kind of like see where the world's at. But if you start to surround yourself with people that make you a little bit like intimidated and you're like, man, how do they have what they have? Get jealous in a way. And I say jealous, not envy. Jealous is I want what they have and I want them to have it too. Envy is I want them to have it, or I want what they have and I don't want them to have it. Get jealous and just start saying like, hey, how did you get what you have? Are you willing to share that with me? And that's what I do pretty regularly on my social media. So follow me there. Feel free to DM me there. I respond to all those. The Album Accelerator is a wonderful thing that I love educating, and albums is something I know really well. I can show you how to serve every one of your clients with albums. It's one of the things that I teach, and we really are. We're doing everything we can to give it away. You use Kiss Books, and you'll be able to get that for free. If you don't, we figure out ways that you can get because what matters more to me is the impact. It's like the money is a beautiful thing, and with more money you do get a bigger platform, but it also multiplies who you are. And so feel free to make a bunch of money, but just make sure your stuff's together before you do.
Yeah.
But I love what I get to do. And through social media, one thing that I love about it is when I record something for social media, you're actually looking at yourself when you do it. Like when you record this thing right into the phone, I'm preaching to myself on social media. You just happen to get to hear it from me. But I'm making a commitment to myself when I say those things. Sometimes I come across as like maybe condescending. If I ever come across as condescending, let me know. But it's probably because you believe something that I'm saying isn't true about you. If I'm like, if you just did this, I rarely say should or have to. I say if you choose to, and if you get to do this, if you want to do this, go do this because it's impacted me. And a lot of times I'm just like, this is what I'm working on. You just get to be along for the ride. And sometimes when I make those commitments, I'm like, man, did I really just say that? Because now I either get to show up and do it or not. And a lot of people know this, so I'm making a commitment to myself, but a lot of times that platform just holds me accountable, and I'm just trying to be as real as I can. I want when I get to meet people in person, I'm like, I want you to know that that's who I am, is the person I am on social media. It's not this like unattained, you can't get to me or something, it's like we were built for connection. And I do have my squad that has like full access to me, and I use do not disturb a lot. It's such a gift from the iPhone. But I want you to know, like, if I ever say like, and I do regularly, like, I love you, it means that I care enough for you to
Yeah.
stand for you because I want to see people succeed. And that was not me always, but I want to see you succeed. And that's why I love podcasts like this, because I want to see you succeed. I
Yeah.
want to see people listening in succeed, and that's what life's about.
I think that's the interesting thing too, is because this podcast, this is not about teaching. Like this is the only thing inside of story community that has nothing to do with teaching photographers. This podcast is to teach me. So I want to meet with people like you who know things that I want to know. I want to meet with people who inspired you or who have interesting stories and just create, interesting solutions to those stories or ideas or things. And that's what I love, because you're saying I'm preaching myself. Well, let me tell you, every time I post something in this group, in this Facebook group for photographers, it is because it is something I have dropped the ball on, or I'm thinking, or I am convicted about there. I'm not preaching to you guys either. I'm preaching to me. So it's powerful. And that's also proves your point. I'm surrounded with people like you, then I start becoming like people like you. And that wasn't true a couple of years ago. That was the world's out to get me, Roy. And we don't need that.
Yeah.
So
that skeptic will get us sometimes, and some people are. Not everybody's for us. So the people I try to surround myself with are people that celebrate really well, and they mourn the losses with me really well. And those people get a little more access. There's no doubt about it. But just be careful with those things, because the world doesn't celebrate that well anymore, and it doesn't mourn the losses. We don't like to see people in pain, and we don't like to see people celebrate because we get jealous in an unhealthy way or envious of them.
yeah,
And so it matters. But I'm so glad that we met and we got to spend some time together, because it's like I could see you going to make an impact. And if there's anything I could speak into you, I would love to do that. But I learn from you as well. It's just like, what are you going through and how's that going? And I just love that. And the fact that you show up the way that you do is like a wonderful thing. Of course, I want to see you do it in like a healthy way, because I've done the whole workaholic thing as well, and it's like it feels so good, because accomplishing is one of those things. That's what success means. It just means checking off things. It's like a list of things that we get to check off. It feels so good, and we get that little dopamine hit from it. And it's like one of those things can be like, did I get enough sleep last night? That's a good feeling. It pays off long term. And it's like, oh man, it's not easy to get a good night's sleep. Now I'm pretty good at it, but it takes time, because this mind wants to spin. But now I've learned how to slow it down and turn it back up. And it's not always like motivating and all these things. There's times where it's like really difficult, but man, more times than not, I can control it. And that is not a normal thing, for me. Like in the past, it was like it could spin out however it wants to, and I'm just like, what are we up against today? And the world is out to get me. I've been in that seat. It doesn't have to be like that if you surround yourself with people that are like moving forward, that are totally for you. I'm going to challenge and support you, and that.
Yeah,
I'm going to show up and I'm going to challenge and support you, and that's what true love is to me. And so when I say I love you, that's what I mean. I'm going to challenge and support you. I'm not going to support you to where it's like rainbows and unicorns, and I'm not going to challenge you so much that it breaks you either. But I am going to hold the mirror up and be like, man, you could do amazing things, and you are doing amazing things. And I can't wait to see you do it more. The only way you can do it more is if you become healthier and you become that version of you that's healthy enough to handle more. And I can't wait to see that for you,
Yeah. Appreciate that, man. Yeah. It's a crazy thing where, you got to put yourself first before you put everyone else first. And I think for me, a lot of times, like the excitement with that being up all night is like, I know what happens when I give that resource to the photographers in this group, whether it's for free or whether they've paid for it in the course. It's like, oh, I finally understand how to do this. I'm like, man, I just made someone who's not a web, a designer understand how to design a website layout really quickly and like do it the same way I would do it as a professional designer before. So it's those kind of things where it's just like, man, I'm excited for that dopamine hit, but you're right. I need to sleep first.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Totally.
Well, cool. Let's go ahead and just recap one more time. I want to just say kiss.us and then at Shaun Austin on Instagram, right?
Instagram. Yep. Instagram.
Yep. Perfect. Yep. Instagram. And then we'll have all those links in the show notes afterwards. But I just, again, man, like anytime I get to spend with you is always just such a benefit to me. And I know at the very least you've helped me grow. And I'm sure there's someone in this group that's like, man, I really need to hear that today. So thanks again. I will see all you guys in the group later on. But again, thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks.